Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty striking. Ethereum gas fees. They've plummeted in early 2025.
Right, down to levels we really haven't seen consistently since, what, 2019?
Yeah.
Maybe early 2020. It's quite the shift.
Exactly. We've got a bunch of data you sent over, and we're going to try and unpack why this happened and, what it really means for Ethereum going forward.
And this is for all of you listening who want to get the real story behind the tech headlines without needing a PhD in computer science.
We'll break down the key insights. So the core question really is, what caused these super low fees, and what are the knock-on effects?
Let's dig in.
Okay, so first off, the drop itself. It's not just talk. The data backs it up. We're seeing reports, on-chain data, transaction fees consistently under 20 cents.
Yeah, and GUI prices often in single digits. I mean, you mentioned that 2.025 GUI reading from April 16, 2025. We even saw dips lower, like 0.3, 0.4 GUI sometimes.
Which is just, wow, it really takes you back to those earlier days of Ethereum.
It really does. And you have to contrast that, right?
Yep.
Think about DeFi summer or the NFT craze.
Yeah.
People were paying, well, tens, sometimes hundreds of dollars per transaction.
Yeah, easily. Even just looking back at 2023, the median fee was nearly $14. And April 2024, still around 14 GUI average. So this is, well, it's dramatic.
Absolutely significant.
So what actually triggered this? What were the big drivers behind this nosedive?
It seems like a confluence of factors, really. First, there was definitely a cooling off of activity directly on Ethereum Layer 1, just fewer transactions happening there.
Okay. Why was that?
You can probably point to a few things. Market uncertainty is one. Remember those U.S. tariffs announced around early April 25? That might have made traders pause a bit. And, maybe some of the initial hype around L1, DeFi, and NFTs had just settled down. People started looking at alternatives too, like Solana, especially for things like meme coins.
Right. Less demand on the main road, so tolls go down. Makes sense. But layer 2s, they played a massive part, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely huge. We saw this enormous migration of what users were actually doing over to layer 2 solutions.
Yeah.
Arbitrum, Optimism, Base, zk-Sync, Starknet, all of them.
And the scale of that shift was pretty big.
It was staggering, actually. Base, for example, was processing over 3 times the number of transactions as the entire Ethereum L1 network.
Wow. 3 times.
Yeah, and if you combine the activity across the major L2s, it was something like 4.5 times the L1 volume.
So most of the action just moved.
Essentially, yeah. It's like Ethereum L1 is becoming less of a crowded city street and more like the underlying highway infrastructure that supports lots of faster, cheaper toll roads, the L2s. The main highway is still vital for, final settlement, but the day-to-day traffic, it's mostly on those L2s now.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the tech caught up to help them, like EIP 4844, proto-dank sharding.
Exactly. That was a critical piece of the puzzle. EIP 4844 introduced what are called blobs. Think of it as a new, much cheaper way for these L2s to post their transaction summaries, their data, back onto the main Ethereum chain.
Cheaper data posting for L2s.
Way cheaper. It slashed their data posting costs by like 75 to 98% in many cases.
Whoa.
And crucially, because it became so much cheaper for L2s to post this data, they didn't need to buy as much of the regular L1 gas anymore. They were competing for that same space. Now there's even a separate fee market just for blob space.
Got it. So L2s got cheaper themselves, and they stopped clogging up L1 as much.
Precisely. And you can't forget EIP 1559 in all of this.
Right, the fee mechanism that burns ETH. How does that fit in?
Well, EIP 1559 has that base fee that automatically adjusts based on demand.
Right.
When demand is low, like we saw, the base fee naturally goes down, pushing transaction costs towards the minimums.
Okay.
Plus, there was also that recent increase in the block gas limit, wasn't there? A 20% bump to 36 million gas per block. So a bit more capacity on L1 too.
So it's like EIP 1559 sets the floor when things are quiet. L2s handle most of the traffic. And EIP 4844 makes it super cheap for those L2s to check back in with L1.
That's a pretty good summary, yeah. It all worked together to bring those L1 fees way down.
Okay, so great news for users, obviously. Cheaper transactions are always welcome. But what are the broader implications for the Ethereum ecosystem?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, it definitely reinforces this trend of L1 becoming primarily a settlement and data availability layer. Most user-facing activity, DeFi, NFTs, it's shifting heavily to L2s.
And what about economics? All that ETH burning we heard about with EIP 1.59, that must have slowed down, right?
Drastically. With base fees so low, the amount of ETH being burned plummeted. We actually saw periods where Ethereum became slightly inflationary again, net positive issuance.
So that whole ultrasound money narrative, This throws a bit of a wrench in it.
It certainly challenges the idea that ETH will always be deflationary. It depends heavily on network usage driving up that base fee. It also means less revenue for validators from priority fees on L1, which could, squeeze staking yields a bit.
Okay. But there's a new revenue stream, blob fees.
Yeah, that's the flip side. While small compared to peak priority fees, blob fees are becoming a noticeable source of L1 revenue. I think the figure was over 1,600 ETH burned via blob fees in about 90 days. So the economic picture is definitely changing.
Interesting. So how are people reacting? Any expert takes on this?
Well, you see different perspectives. Santiment, the analytics firm, suggested low fees might signal trader hesitation, maybe a lull before a rebound.
Okay.
But others, like Martin Koppelman from Gnosis, expressed some concern about persistently low base fees potentially making staking less attractive. He even floated the idea of raising the L1 gas limit further.
Right. And Vitalik Buterin himself has argued for more L1 capacity, hasn't he, to better support the L2s long term?
Exactly. He talks about needing L1 capacity for things like censorship resistance and ensuring users can exit L2s en masse if needed. It's all about supporting that L2-centric future.
And things aren't standing still. There's the Pectra upgrade coming up soon, right? Around May 7th?
Yep. Pectra is expected to double the blob capacity again, potentially making L2 data posting even cheaper, or at least more stable. Plus other things like exploring stablecoins for gas fees and increasing the validator staking limit.
So constant evolution. And the long game is still full dank sharding.
That's the vision. Full dank sharding aims to provide just massive scalability for L2s, potentially pushing towards, 100,000 transactions per second or even more across the ecosystem.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the key takeaway seems to be that Ethereum's fee situation has fundamentally shifted. It's the success, really, of the Layer 2 scaling strategy, supercharged by EIP 4844.
Definitely. It's led to these ultra-low L1 fees, which is great for accessibility, but it comes with these significant economic shifts, the ETH burn, validator revenue, the role of L1 that the community is actively working through with ongoing upgrades.
So for everyone listening, maybe the final thought is, how does this shift towards an Ethereum ecosystem centered around Layer 2s change things for you?
Right. Does it impact the apps you use, the investments you're looking at? What sort of new innovations or possibilities does this much more scalable, much more affordable Ethereum environment actually unlock? That's definitely something worth pondering.